third webinar in a series put together by the Indo-American Press Club. I'd like to formally welcome everyone. Namaskar, good morning, good evening, and welcome once again to the international webinar. I just want to start by saying, first of all, everyone, thank you for joining us. A little bit about Indo-American Press Club, a nonprofit organization headquartered right here in New York City, where I'm joining you guys from my hometown. Formed in 2013 with the ideals that this organization should provide a common platform for journalists in the United States of Indian origin. So here we are having some important conversations with some wonderful and delightful, insightful guests. I want to start by giving Dr. Joe Chalo, Chairman, a couple of minutes to welcome everyone and get this webinar started.
Good morning. Thank you, Ashmita, and thank you all for joining us live on this very important webinar on the topic. We have an esteemed guest, like we have the lead economist at the World Bank, Dr. Ejaz Ghani. We'll be joined by Mr. PC Cyriac shortly. We're expecting Mr. N.K. Premachandran, Member of Parliament of India, and my personal hero, Dr. Professor M.D. Nalapat, Vice Chairman and author of the Advanced Manipal Group. So thank you all. And again, all the viewers who are watching us live on several TV channels and also on our Facebook Live, welcome. This is an international webinar on this topic. This topic, as I know, is very sensitive. We see several protests around the world outside of Indian consulates and embassies. So I thank you all in advance, to have a great discussion about the topic and informing our media on what is the truth behind this bills and the protests going on. Thank you. Back to Ashmita.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. So let's get started. I'd like to invite some members of the IAPC team who have joined us from all over the United States, Canada, and we'll kick it off with Ms. Hema Virani, who will be introducing our first panelist, Dr. Ejaz Ghani. Ms. Virani, please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ashmita. So I'm really honored to be here today, and I would like to introduce to you Dr. Ejaz Ghani. He's a lead economist at the World Bank. So Dr. Ejaz Ghani is one of the world's leading economists, and currently he's serving as a lead economist at the World Bank. So he has written on all sorts of topics such as economic growth, macro policies, poverty, employment, entrepreneurship, urbanization, gender trade, decentralization, and agriculture. So you know he's an authority. He has been a consultant for ILO, which is the International Labor Organization, UNCTAD, which is the UN Conference on Trade and Development, and UNICEF. He has edited several books, including Reshaping Tomorrow, Is South Asia Ready for the Big Leap? And The Poor $500 Billion in South Asia. He has worked for ILO, UNCTAD, and UNICEF prior to working for the World Bank. But he also taught economics at Oxford University and Delhi University. So he has MPhil and D philosophy, Masters in Philosophy and Economics from Oxford University. So welcome, Dr. Ejaz Ghani.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Virani.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You mean yeah, just firstly, thank you for the very illustrious, but just one correction. I have left the World Bank, and whatever I'm going to discuss are my personal views and not the World Bank views. And this is a great platform. It'll be nice if I come a little later and people who are on the ground speak first, but you decide.
Thank you for the correction. Apologies.
Thank you, Dr. Ghani, and once again, pleasure having you join us in this conversation. It is both extremely sensitive, but has global economic consequences, so we're glad to have you on board to further the conversation. Dr. Joe, I'm going to go back to you here to introduce our next guest, Professor Nalapat, who is a frequent participant of these conversations. It's such a pleasure to have you. Dr. Joe, if you could introduce our next guest, please. Thank you.
Professor Nalapat, it's an honor to have you again. We have to call you now a friend of Indo-American Press Club. Thank you again for gracing us. You are a well-known author, a columnist, and the vice chairman of the Manipal Advanced Research Group. And currently, he's the editorial director of ITV Network India and the Sunday Guardian. He's a vice chair of Manipal Advanced Research Group and the director of the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations at Manipal University. So he has been coordinating editor at the Times of India and the editor of at the Madhubhumi. I love him more because he's the son of a famous author and poet Kamala Suraya, whom I was a fan of. So Professor Nalapat, welcome to the forum again.
Well, I'd like to say that after that last sentence of yours, it's impossible not to love you. So thank you very much. I'm truly delighted. And my mother, I think, fought. She was independent, and she had an independent mind all her life. And I think all of us in the family were very proud of the way she, in a sense, blazed a trail so that women are seen as at least as independent as men, and hopefully, because I come from a matriarchal society, my mother's family name is my name, hopefully even more independent than men. Thank you very much for that. I'd only like to say that I've been following what has been happening in some detail, this quote-unquote farmers' agitation. And as you correctly said, it's been going on across the world. Well, I personally think that what we are seeing in so many cities across the world is essentially not so much about the farmers' agitation as such, but essentially, individuals who are not happy with the current government in India, and basically would like, that government to change. Obviously, 2024 is the next parliamentary election, but before that time, basically make that government as internationally, if I may say so, unpopular as possible among the public. And in a democracy, whatever the imperatives of strategy and geopolitics, public opinion is very important, of course, and it does play a role, although not a very key role. Otherwise, you have dictatorships, you have other groups that have been supported by democracies, and you have democracies that have been opposed by democracies. So that's not the case. So I would only like to say that that what you're seeing essentially in India as well is that this particular agitation has been used as a lever to basically go against the current government, and they have front-loaded a lot of allegations and comments about that. Now, I've gone through the law, and you have sent a very good position paper on that, and I'd like to just say, for example, the farmers' produce trade and promotion to sell their harvest outside notified APMC mandi without taxes. Now, the point is, this does not abolish the APMC mandis at all. The APMC mandis will be a fact of life, and any farmer who would like to sell his or her produce is welcome to sell through the APMC. But the only thing is that the monopoly of the mandis will be ended, and the farmer will be enabled to sell to other groups as well, whether it is other agencies dealing with farm produce or private companies or whatever. The farmer will be given that particular freedom to sell. Now, as I said, it is basically the ending of the monopolies of the APMCs. And I can understand those individuals who are very associated with the APMCs, which are very powerful in some states in India. In fact, in two states in particular, Haryana and Punjab, and they are very, very, very influential there. I can understand why they are not very happy about it. Also, the fact that the Artiyas, basically the agents, will now have to register for something called the GST, the Goods and Services Tax. It was called a good and simple tax. Frankly, from day one of the introduction of this tax, it may be a good to have an all India tax, But the problem with GST is not just one tax, it's about 4 different taxes split, and each of those 4 taxes have been split up into multiple ways. You have a very confusing array of tax rates. And so if this is called simplicity, well, I would only like to say that the most advanced rocket science is something that can be taught in kindergarten. So I'm not saying it's a great act, but it goes in the right direction of ensuring that there is one particular act that can apply to the whole country. So one nation and one market, wherever, I think that is not unhelpful to business, etc. So the point is that those who are dealing with farm produce will have to register under GST, and they'll also have to do that horror of horrors. They'll have to give their PAN card details. Now, the PAN card is basically the permanent assessee number, which essentially means the number that you put when you pay your income tax. Now, I think we all know that in India, I mean, you have a large number of people who, if you look at the cars that they drive, if you look at the homes that they stay in, if you look at the amount of foreign travel they do and the hotels they stay in, well, and you look at the recorded income, the recorded income is not very much. So obviously by some miracle, they're able to make the rupee stretch and much more than most of us. Of course, farm income is completely exempt. And that's why in this particular act, any sale by the farmer to any agency, private or public, is exempt completely from taxation. Let me again go back to your point. The Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement and Farm Assurance and Farm Services facilitates contract farming and direct marketing. Well, look, this can be, what has been said is that this is done for the benefit of 2 particular corporate houses. Well, let me only tell you one thing. I don't think the BJP is a suicidal party. Farmers are a very critical element of the voting base of every political party in India, and most definitely the BJP. And frankly, if this were, if farmers in general were to be inconvenienced by this kind of thing, I think that would hit the BJP very hard. But the only point is that a large number of states, including the states in which there's a big agitation against this thing, there is a lot of contract farming taking place. I mean, in the state of Punjab, for example, you have many farmers who basically contract their lands, and that is all across the country, frankly, that you contract their lands and you go and work in the town and your land is contracted. So actually contract farming but now it's made legal, it's recognized. Previously it was illegal, it was not recognized. And my personal view is the more something that is unavoidable is legal and recognized and taxed, the better for the country. I mean, we have a problem, for example, that many activities that are very common across the country, and I'd like to say, for example, betting and gambling. Now, I would like to say I have not done any betting. I think I'd probably lose. And as far as gambling is concerned also, regrettably, I've been too cowardly to go and take a flutter, even in buying a lottery ticket. But tens of millions of people do this, and where gambling is illegal and where such activities are illegal, what happens is it becomes under the radar and black money gets generated, taxes fail to get paid, which in my view is not a good thing for the country. The last thing is the Essential Commodities Amendment Bill for production, storage, movement and sale, to deregulate the storage, movement, sale of cereals, pulses, edible oils and onions. Today, the state can direct whom you have to sell your pulses and cereals and everything else to. The important thing about this is today, fortunately, the Indian tastes are sorry, somebody is listening to this. The tastes are changing. You've got vegetables, you've got fruits, you've got all kinds of, fortunately, pulses as well. So you're going beyond cereals into other kinds of food. But what happens in a state where you are locked into a system where essentially you are paid only if you produce wheat and rice, and whatever quantities of wheat and rice you produce, you are paid pretty well, then you are locked into producing those items. And may I point out something that is, in fact, I would say shocking. I would say something which, frankly, it is something which all of us need to hang our head in shame. A minimum of 30% of the food produced in India is fed either to rats or rots. Either rots in storage or is fed to rats. I'm using 30%. It could be more, it could be a little bit less, but not very much less. And this is in a country where, frankly, you have, as Dr. Ghani will tell you, a very considerable amount of poverty and a lot of families who are really on the poverty line. Well, if you deregulate that and give them the freedom, then, I don't see anything here which says that two particular businessmen have got the monopoly of purchase. In case that happens, I'm very certain that in case, we are talking about media which is being friendly to the government, yes, but you also have websites that are not friendly. You have also got media that's not friendly. You have individual voices that are not friendly. And I'm very certain that if you end one monopoly and go in for a duopoly, that is two businessmen instead of the monopoly of the state, I think this is going to be commented upon. I don't think it's going to help the BJP in any election, and it's certainly not going to help the Prime Minister Modi in his politics.
Thank you, Professor.
Again, I would only like to say, I'm not sure that Prime Minister Modi is intent on bowing out of politics and being defeated by his opponents. If I know something about this gentleman, he is very keen on winning elections, and he is very keen on winning elections. In my view, the party has gone too far. They're trying to get elected in every state. In the first few years after coming to power for a second time. I think we are a plural society which includes plural parties also. And I don't think this, BJP, so the BJP becomes what the Congress was in the 1950s. I'm not sure that's a trend that I personally am in favor of. But
Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
These bills are, I don't think they're pro or anti-farmer or whatever, but they are deregulatory, they are reforms, and people like me, we do believe reforms are important, and if they're stopped, if they're paralyzed, well, that will stop further reform, which I don't think is a good thing for India.
Thank you, Professor. Let me also make sure I welcome our esteemed ambassador, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, who is a former ambassador of India to Cambodia and also to the country of Chile, and a close friend and now a best-selling author. Ambassador Kapoor, welcome as a friend of IAPC on this panel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph Chalil. It's such a pleasure to be here, participating in this very, very interesting discussion. I've heard what Professor Nalapat has just said. It's something very topical, something very useful for the listeners all over the world and in India particularly. And I think somebody will have to be muted because there's some noise. I also want to welcome the Honorable MP, Mr. N.K. Premachandran, who's here with us on this panel today. It's such an honor to have the Honorable MP with us. Thank you for joining us, sir, from India. It is an important international discussion, and I've had the opportunity to host many visits by prime ministers and ministers and MPs and president and vice president in my capacity as a diplomat in the Indian Foreign Service in so many different countries of the world. So it's so good to see you here and to understand what you represent. And we have had MPs joining our discussions and panels on important meetings in so many countries, and they have represented the viewpoint of India in a very fair and balanced manner. And I am looking forward to your viewpoint. Also to see our very dear friend, Mr. Cyriac, who's also part of the same community of civil service officers. So good to have you here, sir. My batchmate is J. Alphonse from Kerala, and quite a few other batchmates also in Kerala. But thank you for being here. And Ejaz Ghani is a dear old friend. We were together in Oxford at the same time, and I am always very happy to see him here. And thank you, Ashmita, for coordinating this beautiful visit. I do not want to take up any more time. Wish you all the very best for success. I'll be listening in on and chiming in whenever I get the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. Appreciate it. And what a warm welcome for everyone on the panel. Appreciate that. I'd like to invite Mr. Matthew Kudi to officially welcome the Honorable Mr. N.K. Premachandran, a member of Indian Parliament. Please, Mr. Matthew Kudi, if you could do the honors.
Good morning and good evening. Those who are in India, good evening to you. And my name is Matthew Kotisha. I'm the Director Board Secretary of Indo-American Press Club. Indo-American Press Club is very honored to have the presence of Honorable Member of Indian Parliament, Mr. N.K. Premachandran, who is a prominent Indian politician. He is presently Member of Parliament from the Kollam Lok Sabha constituency in Kerala. And he was the former Minister for Water Resources in the government of Kerala and was responsible for the irrigation, groundwater development, water supply, and sanitation. He initiated a number of innovative steps in drinking water sector. He began the consultancy wing of Kerala Water Authority called Vascon and mooted the bottled water plant and pipe factory. He is known for the public speeches and he has written book for Iraq based on his travel experience in Iraq. And he was in Delhi this week and personally participated in the farmers' protest in Delhi. So he has experienced the feelings of the farmers in Delhi. So it's very honored to be to have Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. N.K. Premachandran, in this discussion. Welcome you, sir. Welcome you to this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Can I start?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this privilege to participate in this international webinar. What is the truth behind the farmers' strike in India? That is the topic which we are discussing. First of all, I want to congratulate the Indo-American Press Club for organizing such an international webinar on this topic. It is a very significant topic as far as Indian situation is concerned, and it is very hopeful that even in the international media is also discussing about the farmers' strike or the struggle in India. I think that this is a unique strike which we have ever seen in the history of after post-independent period. I fully disagree with our honorable friend, Professor M.D. Nalapat. And his opening remarks regarding the strike was that the political parties are taking advantage of the position to destabilize the Narendra Modi BJP-led government at the center. So it is a political weapon being used so as to destabilize the government at the center. And that means he is questioning the bona fides of this farmers' struggle. See, let me substantiate my point. What is the bona fides of the government of India in this matter? See, the drastic structural agricultural reforms are being pursued by means of these three acts. I'm not going to the contents and details of the three distinct acts. Everybody is well aware of it. And how this has been promulgated or how this has been introduced. During the COVID-19 pandemic situation, when the country and the people, the farmers at large, are in big crisis, are not able to discuss or concentrate on all these issues, these bills have come or these laws have come into existence through an ordinance. We all know that as per Article 123 of the Constitution of India, this ordinance can be promulgated only on extraordinary compelling situations. This is a legislation by an executive. See, when the long pending, the 1955 Essential Commodities Act of 1955, it is pending since long decades, and so many other acts and two new ordinances, and the existing Act of 1955 is drastically amended. When such drastic, basic, fundamental changes to the agricultural sector and agricultural law is taking place, whether it is through an ordinance, whether it is the legislation by an executive, and that too during the COVID-19 pandemic period, if the government is having any bona fides, definitely the government ought to have come to the parliament through a bill. And let us have a threadbare discussion about the bill. Whether this bill has been discussed and debated by the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Agriculture or a select committee or a joint parliamentary committee, nothing is being done. So whether the government is taking into confidence, the parliament is not being taken into confidence in the drastic agricultural reforms. That is a basic objection which I would like to pose. So what is the bona fides of the government in promulgating these ordinances? We know the economic reforms which we have pursued since 1990s or since midst of 1980s. See, almost all these issues are well debated, agitated in the parliament, and the merits and demerits have already discussed, and as a part of the discussion, debate in the parliament, these bills are becoming laws. Here, what has happened? First, you have promulgated the ordinances, it has become a law, and subsequently 10-15 days of COVID parliament session has convened, and in a rush, without sending the bill to the Parliamentary Standing Committee, without having any detailed clause by clause discussion, all the three bills were put together and passed. And how it was passed in the Rajya Sabha? It was also a big controversy. According to me, strictly speaking, in the strict sense, according to Constitution, Article 100 of the Constitution, 100 of the Constitution, it is very clear that all decisions of the Parliament should be taken, or it should be on the basis of majority. What is majority? How can you prove the majority? You can prove the majority, you can establish the majority only through the numbers. How can you determine the number who support the bill and oppose the bill? Only through the division. When the opposition demanded, the genuine demand was made in the Rajya Sabha to have a division, without allowing the division, the chairman of Rajya Sabha has declared that the bills have been passed. Why this is? Why this rush? Why this exigency? What is urgency? What are the compelling circumstances necessitating promulgation of an ordinance? That has to be first, the government has to explain. And subsequently, the bill was partly discussed. It was not a threadbare discussion of the bill, but at least it was discussed. We have raised so many points. We have raised the issue of minimum support price. We said that there should have a legislative mechanism. There we have moved amendments. We have given notice of amendments. We have said that minimum support price should be ensured. The government has to ensure the minimum support price. And we have raised a civil remedial measures. Here it is only alternate dispute redressal mechanism is envisaged in the acts. Poor farmer or middle class farmer, suppose he is hurt, or if there is a grievance of the farmer, he is not entitled to approach the civil court of jurisdiction, and civil court's remedy is totally barred. And so many issues we have highlighted in the bills. Whether the government was willing to accept as even a single amendment, even the government has not even responded to all these issues. Now, when the strike has started, now the Honorable Prime Minister, Agricultural Minister, Home Minister, everybody is saying that we are ready to concede to the demands of ensuring the minimum support price regarding the civil court remedy. Now, so that means, so the basic point which I would like to disagree with Professor M.T. Nalapat is that the intent of the bill, the intention or the way by which the bill are bulldozed in the parliament and get it passed without taking into it, without having a division, means it is totally undemocratic legislation. That is my basic objection. Otherwise, if the government have any bona fides in bringing, suppose it is in favor of the farmers, it is in favor of the farm sector or the agriculture sector in general, why don't the due procedure of law or the due procedure in the legislative process have not been complied with? Now the government is ready and willing to concede so many demands. And there also we have so many differences of opinion. I am not going to all the details. This is the first objection which I would like to make. And regarding I participated in the strike for 5-6 hours. Then I went there. See, it's a dedicated strike by the real farmers. I am a member of parliament. I am the member of parliament, and also I am the leader of a responsible political party, though it's a small party in India. I approached them. I said to them, I am so and so. But what they have said to me, we are not allowing any political party leaders to the dais. Then I said, I am member of parliament. I have moved the disapproval resolution disapproving the ordinance. I have moved the motion in Lok Sabha to disapprove the ordinance promulgated by the government. So I participated in the discussion. I am fully supporting you that no MPs will be allowed. What they said, only the Kisan movement or the farm, Kisan organizations leaders will be allowed to speak in the strike or struggle. This is the way they are managing it. But it is quite unfortunate to note that the observation of the one side, the government is trying to have a consensus and to get rid of the issue by having a consensus or to have a settlement. And the other side, the responsible ministers of the center, they are saying that these are all divisive forces. They are being supported by so many other agencies. And what are the observations made by so many responsible leaders? It is Khalistan. So what is the way you are addressing the strike? So that is why I am saying that it is a genuine strike from the part of the agriculture. That yes, I do agree that it is, most of them are from Punjab, Haryana, and nearby states of Delhi. Because it is most adversely affected states are the farmers of these particular states of Punjab and Haryana. They are the severely affected people. And they are coming out with their families, children, and all these families, and they are not wearing any mask. It is wonderful to see that thousands and thousands of farmers, they are coming without even wearing the mask. There is no COVID, nothing. They are very brave enough to face any situation, any issue. Is it a political movement? Yes, it's a political movement in one sense. What is the politics? Politics is for the people, for the nation, for the society. In that way, it's a big political movement, but it is not a party political movement to destabilize the government at the center. But it is absolutely a genuine struggle on the part of the genuine farmers, and their genuine issues are there. So my submission, my suggestion is, if the government is having any bona fide intention to resolve the issue, you may please convene the parliament. You may please convene the parliament, discuss it in the parliament. Let us see whether the bill is good or not. Let us discuss it once again. Or even without discussing, let us discuss the issue of the farmers. Let the parliament be convened and take the confidence of the parliament and see what the best for the suppose I am not against the reforms. I fully agree with the participant, most of the panelists. We are not against the reforms. And one point also I would like to add: deregulation. What is deregulation? Deregulation of petroleum prices. We, the people of India, are the best sufferers. Even at the time in the year 2010, when the petrol price was deregulated, at that time, the then government was Dr. Manmohan Singh. What was the assurance given in the parliament? The assurance given in the parliament was that whenever the international crude oil price increases, the retail price of the petrol will also increases. Whenever it decreases, it will decline or it will decreases. What is happening in 2020? When we are at 2020, when the crude oil price is less than $50 per barrel, what is the price of retail price of petrol and diesel in India? Whether the deregulation is benefiting the common masses or the common people of our country. So here also deregulation of the agriculture produce market, and that will be benefiting for the time being, for temporarily it may have some good or some, but suppose all these regulations are taken away, and in the Essential Commodities Amendment Act, it is stocking, movement, everything is deregulated, and further even the retail distribution is not coming with from the processing, movement, and even what is the word which is being used is that is also very controversial. It is being stated that sorry, 1 second. I forgot that word. It is everything is being exempted from the regulations. That means absolute 100% deregulation means a country like India having the poverty, and even the food security will be affected in future. So many consequences are there in such a situation. My basic point is, when you make such a drastic, basic, fundamental amendments or reforms to the existing laws or to the existing scenario, definitely the concerned people have to be taken into confidence. The opposition have to be taken into confidence. The parliament have to be taken into confidence. Without doing any of these exercise, only by using the huge majority in Lok Sabha and also majority in another way in Rajya Sabha, bulldozing the bills in parliament and promulgating ordinance through the presidential legislative power. You are making laws, and that against that the farmers are making their own demands and the strike is going on. We can never say that this is an anti-democratic strike. This is not a strike for destabilizing the government at the center, but government is labeling it as a politically motivated strike. Yesterday also the Honorable Prime Minister has spoke in Madhya Pradesh with the agricultural, with the farmers, that it is politically motivated, misleading the agriculturists. How can we mislead? None of the opposition parties not there in front of the strike. It is being organized by them. It is being regulated by them. They are finding resources from among themselves. So such a strike, please don't tarnish it in any other way. If there are any mistake on their part, definitely we have to discuss. Then some consensus have to come, for which my suggestion is let the government convene the parliament. These are the opening remarks which I would like to make. Sorry for the...
Thank you. Ashmita.
Thank you, Honorable MP, Mr. N.K. Premachandran. Strong opening remarks. I think this is going to be a very lively debate, and I think everyone's anxious to get started. We have one more intro. Last but not least, I'd like to invite Ms. Anita Naveen, another member of the IAPC team, to introduce our esteemed panelist, Mr. P.C. Cyriac, IAS, retired Chief Secretary, Tamil Nadu. Ms. Anita, if you could do the honors.
Please unmute.
You're on mute, Ms. Anita.
Thank you, Ashmita. I'm honored to be part of this webinar, and I serve as the Secretary of IAPC Vancouver. Most welcome to Mr. P.C. Cyriac. A warm welcome on behalf of IAPC. Mr. P.C. Cyriac is a retired Chief Secretary of Tamil Nadu. After his engineering graduation from College of Engineering, Trivandrum, he was selected to the IAS in Tamil Nadu cadre in the year 1966. He also obtained a postgraduate diploma in public sector management from Strathclyde Business School, UK, as deputed by Government of India. During his service, he worked as a district collector of Madurai, chairman of Rubber Board, chairman of Tamil Nadu Electricity Board, chairman and MD of Tamil Nadu Newsprint, Tamil Nadu Transport Corporation, etc. He also worked as Chief Secretary to Government of Tamil Nadu, Principal Secretary to various other different government departments like industries, transport, local administration, commercial tax, etc. After retirement, he worked as a director and chairman of Federal Bank. And currently, he's a president of InFarm, the largest independent farmers association in Kerala. A warm welcome to Mr. P.C. Cyriac, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind words. Can I say something now?
Please do.
Okay, my dear distinguished panelists like Dr. Nalapat and respected Mr. Premachandran and other friends, thank you for the good opportunity given to me. This is a very controversial issue now. The whole atmosphere is on fire, we can say. An unprecedented number of farmers have gathered, and they are sitting down in the very, very cold nights, braving the cold nights in Delhi. For the 21st, 3 weeks are already over. So I am surprised why the government is not taking the initiative to begin some constructive discussions with them and find out their problems and solve them and let them go home. But they are simple people, very simple-minded, Sardarjis mostly from Punjab. They are very hard-working people, but very simple people. If only the government is in a mood to concede their genuine demands, I am sure they will say, Narendra Modi Saab, Kijay, and go back. They will greet the Prime Minister, they will thank the Prime Minister and go back, if only he is large-hearted enough to engage them in a constructive discussion. Their main issues, as everyone knows, is that after this new enactment has come in, they will be losing the protection of the minimum support price. That was the main point which worried them in the beginning. Because as you know, in India, it has been the tradition that every harvest time, the harvest takes place within the course of, say, 2-3 weeks time, thousands of acres. lakhs of acres, hundreds of thousands of acres will get harvested in a 3 or 4 weeks time, and a large quantity of grain will come into the market. When the supply is more than the demand, naturally the prices will be down. The farmers will be forced to leave their grain to usurious, to avaricious merchants at a very low price. They take charge of the grain at a low price, then they store it, they sell it at a high price later to the consumers. So to protect the farmers from this debacle, the problem of the price decline during the time of harvest, the government of India over 60, 70 years ago introduced the concept called minimum support price. That is, the cost of production of a particular crop is assessed by a team of experts, and then they declare the minimum price which the government is committed to defend. If the market price goes down, the government will procure, they will buy. The government will buy this product, they produce at this declared price. This saved the farmers from the serious decline of prices at the time of harvest. This in turn proved to be the biggest incentive which any government can give to Indian farmers. So naturally the farmers, they got encouraged and the production became more. When the country was independent, country became independent 70 years ago, the total grain production in the country was just 30 million tons. Today, it has become 350 million tons. Then the population was 35 crores, 350 million. Today, the population is 4 times more, but the food grain production is 10 times more. With the result, the problem of famine that has been wiped out from India. There is no famine now. There is total food security now, and because of the surplus production. And India has become one of the biggest food grain exporters in the world today, thanks to them, thanks to the MSP, thanks to the minimum support price, which was very strictly implemented and which was carried out faithfully, treating it as the biggest incentive which the government can give to the agriculturists to improve their production and productivity. So even today, about 23 crops government is doing this, has been doing. Now the farmer has a fear that it will be stopped. Why that fear? Because he is supplying his product to the Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee's market, APMC, Mandi as they call in Hindi. So in this market, if the local auction does not give them a fair price, satisfactory price, they will not sell it there. Instead, they will move to the next counter where the Government of India's representative, the Food Corporation of India, is sitting. So Food Corporation of India's agent is sitting there, and he will buy this product at the declared minimum support price. So without any grief for him, within 3 days, he gets the money, the farmer goes away happily. So this situation is going to be lost because under the new law, the contract farming system, they can buy outside the mandi. They can go anywhere and buy it to the farm, buy it anywhere outside, and it is totally tax-free. Now the transactions within the mandi, within the market, within the regulated market, attracts tax at the rate of 8, in Punjab it is 8.5%. Some other state it may be 7, it may be 7.5. So this 8.5% tax is avoided if the farmer goes to the mandi, farmer goes outside to the contract farming or anybody else. This unregulated market, they have not to register themselves or anything. They need not have, there is no regulatory control on them. So they go and buy because the tax is less, therefore the benefit will be more in the short run. After 2-3 years, if this continues, there will be nobody in the APMC market because everyone will be attracted by the 8% tax relief. They will go outside. They will go to the contractors, to the private companies who may offer some good prices to start with. But after 2-3 years, when they find that the APMC is gone and the MSP and the Food Corporation also is gone with the APMC, the farmer will have no recourse but to depend on the private trader outside, unregulated trader. He will then extract his pound of flesh. He will then dictate the terms and the Indian farmer will come to grief. Then again, another issue is because this food grain procurement was taking place by the government agency every year, the government was able to build up a big buffer stock. This buffer stock is only because of this MSP, only because of the regular purchases. Now, if that comes to naught, if that doesn't happen in future, then the buffer stock also will gradually get depleted. And in the event of a crisis like the pandemic this year, or during some other natural calamity, when the people are in distress, this year then the people were in distress when the migrant laborers were on a long trek home from the outskirts of metropolitan cities. They were able to keep themselves alive thanks to the distribution of free food grains from out of the buffer stock. If that buffer stock is lost and buffer stock is brought to nothing in the years to come, then in a crisis situation like the pandemic of this year, the government will find itself weaponless. It will be having no weapon. It will have to seek the goodwill of the private industry. I don't think the private industry, which is interested only in maximizing their profit, will turn their eye towards this situation at all. Then another problem, so therefore there is a level playing field first of all. If that level playing field is guaranteed to the APMC along with the private trader, then there is a chance of there is a fair competition. Why the government is not willing to do that? If only they do that, MSP is protected, fair competition is assured, level playing field is there, a large chunk of the criticism will go away. Government says, no, Prime Minister has guaranteed MSP. But why the amendment can be made in the Act, saying that the private contractor, the contract price should not be less than the minimum support price fixed by the government for that year. Once that guarantee is given, there is no problem. But that guaranteed amendment to the legislation, government is shying away from. So that is a very important issue. Apart from the other issues like the recourse, in case there is a dispute with the contractor, then they have no recourse to civil court. They will have to go to a subdivisional officer who is not who's a middle-level government officer who cannot be expected to dispense justice with full knowledge and experience of the law, etc. So that way, it is a fundamental right of the human beings. In case there is a problem, they should have recourse to approach the judiciary. Even that is not there. Then again, another issue which has been taken, which has come up is the way in which the enactment has been brought in. Mr. Premachandran has already explained. So I suspect that seeing this, the way in which the three enactments have been framed, I find that the whole thing is done only with a view to to make the entry of the corporates into this sector very easy and comfortable. For example, the first enactment that provides for contract, etc., contract farming. During the contract farming, this is the price, etc., to be fixed. In the second enactment, they say that it is only bypassing the APMCs by making the contract trouble-free, tax-free. Then in the third enactment, again, is the Essential Commodities Act. The Essential Commodities Act was fixed in 1955. That the purpose of that act was to prevent hoarding and creating artificial shortage in the market and pushing up the prices. Now these contractors are prevented. Contractors are allowed from taking any amount of material as stock. So the companies, they would like to take up their operations in a large volume. They would not like to take stock, etc., within the limits prescribed by the Essential Commodities Act. And now the government says you may increase the stock, you may stock or you may transport or you may distribute any amount of material as you want. But unfortunately, they say that in case the prices become double, then you may intervene. By the time the prices become double, the damage is already done. The scarcity has already been artificially created. Prices have been pushed up and they have made their loot. So after everything is over, after it has become double, when the government machinery starts moving, the damage is already done. So it is of no use. This all facilitate the three enactments together. The whole purpose is to facilitate the corporate sector, especially the crony capitalists, to enter this new area. In the post-COVID situation, the chances of making more profits by selling industrial products have come down. because the people do not have jobs, they do not have money, they do not have purchasing power. So the people, the corporates cannot expect to make profits from sale of industrial products as usual. Whereas even in the corporate situation, India had a good monsoon and the agricultural sector had grown 4% when there is a huge decline in all other sectors. So this, with this, the agricultural area is offering itself as a lucrative area of business, which the corporates wants to exploit immediately. That explains perhaps the hurry on the part of the government to push it through an ordinance route, and secondly, even cutting short, cutting the corners of the procedure in the Rajya Sabha, in the upper house of the parliament. They got it passed. They declared it as passed because they wanted to honor a commitment made to the crony capitalist forces. They have managed to do that, and now this is the consequence. But now at least the Prime Minister should face the reality. They should discuss with these farmers. In fact, as I mentioned in the beginning, if only he discusses in a magnanimous manner with these genuine farmers and address their grievances, they will greet him, they will congratulate him, they will say, Prime Minister Ki Jai, and then they will return home. So I hope the government will not miss this opportunity to diffuse this situation and bring peace in the agricultural sector in the country and ensure that India continues to be a food grain surplus country with, which will ensure food security for the people. Thank you for the big, these are my opening comments. Maybe thank you very much for the time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. P.C. Cyriac, retired Chief Secretary, Tamil Nadu. I think we have such a strong opening set of remarks that really kicks the discussion into high gear. So let's get started. Once again, welcome everyone who's joining us today from the panelist side, from the attendee side. We're kicking off our next series of webinars, and this topic today that we're discussing is on the very contentious Farmers' Bills issue, which is now getting international attention from media, from governments, heads of states. So it is only right that we delve into this topic. I would like to start with Dr. Ejaz Ghani. Dr. Ghani, you have a place as a lead economist. You have a plethora of experience dealing with global finance matters, whether it's at the World Bank, your time at Oxford as professor. Dr. Ghani, I'd love for you to comment. You know, the two themes that are coming to light here are, on one hand, India's progress in opening up the markets so India can grow on a monetary scale with this new dive into the agricultural sector versus like the Honorable MP has argued, the image of India as the largest democracy in the world and its democratic process at stake. Dr. Ghani, do you feel that this attempt at opening up the country is sacrificing some democratic principles for India, or do you think this is the right step in this regard?
Thank you, Ashmita. Let me first say this is a very great platform. I know that there are limits to capital flows, but there are no limits to knowledge diffusion. So I hope this platform is going to be very important for India because India has the second largest number of internet users in the world. So the future forward of this platform is great. Unfortunately, 400 million people do not have access to internet. They are the farmers in the rural areas. So this platform, this discussion, unfortunately, they're not going to view it. You have summed it up well. I think, you know, the main debate is focused on, you know, that the pricing mechanism reforms focused on liberalizing agriculture may work, may not work. The second pillar of debate is on whether, you know, farmers were consulted in implementing the reforms, that they were not consulted. I'm going to argue that this protest, as the MP said, goes beyond these two arguments. It's a genuine protest. So, but let me start with the pricing. The pricing reforms are good, but they don't work if there is no physical or human infrastructure for the pricing mechanisms to work in the rural areas. And let me elaborate on this. We already know that the manufacturing sector, the large industrial conglomerates, are moving out from mega cities to rural areas to remain cost competitive. The Ambanis and all of them are moving out. But the rural areas don't have access to electricity, and we know that the system is not as efficient. So you may liberalize the pricing. I mean, essentially what is happening is, this is a rural distress. It's not just a protest about, the farmers, but it's a protest why this huge rural-urban gap. I went to Oxford, but I also come from Bihar, and I have seen the two sides, and 400 million people live, but they also see how the others are living. So this movement is not going to die out by just enacting a little more reforms. This is call for bigger, deeper reforms, which calls for scaling up investments in the rural areas, in the physical and social human infrastructure. For a long time, we have viewed rural areas as an area for social relief and humanitarian relief through minimum price supports. They were all well motivated, but they have lost their purpose. Today, the rural people are asking for better quality of life, non-farm jobs, higher income. That calls for bigger structural transformation. And that bigger structural transformation will not only go hand in hand with the, transforming the agriculture into non-agricultural sectors. It will also please the large industrial conglomerates who are in the manufacturing sector, who want to scale up the manufacturing sector by moving into rural areas. So it's a win-win for everybody if we can scale it up from just focusing on pricing reforms to a broader global structural transformation agenda. This scaling up will also enable India to achieve its goal of becoming a 5 trillion economy. So I think this is, as the MP said, it's a genuine protest. It's not one party against another party. It's not just about farmers. It's a protest of the rural people. Let me stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Ghani. Very measured statements, but nonetheless insightful. You mentioned that that this protest goes beyond just the legality of the bills and the process by which they're being pushed forward in the Indian government. I'd like to come back a little bit to the bills, and we have some great questions coming up in our chat as well, so from the audience, and we'll get to those as well. Getting a little bit into the specifics, I'd like to come back to Professor Nalapat, because Professor, you had a very strong views on this, on the pros and cons specifically about the bills. But let's start with the timing, right? Professor, I'd love for you to start this question off for us. Can you comment on the timing of the passing of these ordinances in this manner? The Honorable MP and even Mr. Cyriac touched on the fact that this was done, during a pandemic time without convening the appropriate sessions of Parliament. So Professor Nalapat, please kick off this question. What can you tell us about the timing of the way the ordinances were passed back in June and then the bills were ratified this September?
Well, I'd simply like to say that I would have liked to see reform back in 1950. But regrettably, what happened was that the government of India decided that the best economic model to follow was that of the Soviet Union. And I would like to say that India had a flourishing private sector. When you compare the private sector in 1950 with even Japan, which was damaged very badly by the war, or South Korea, or so many other countries, there was a good private sector. But thereafter, what we call crony capitalism took place, and licenses were used essentially to create monopolies. Now, this is the problem. The problem is that, yes, you have, for example, super civil servants, very conscientious civil servants, but you also have 5% of civil servants who may not be super and conscientious and who would like to use the powers given to them to enrich themselves. Now, this is the problem. We have seen for so many decades that monopolies were created not only for the public sector, but for certain crony capitalists in the private sector as well. So personally, if I may say so, Mr. Premachandran has been a very good minister. He is a very astute parliamentarian, and I must say he argues very powerfully inside Parliament and outside Parliament. So I'm not going to, I'm not going to take issue with that. I've always liked him as a parliamentarian and as a minister. He's done an outstanding job in both. But I'd only like to point out one thing. Back in the 1992, we were talking about a reform. I had a small passing acquaintance with Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao. He has stayed with us, for example, before he was the Prime Minister. After he was Prime Minister, of course, I don't think he needed to stay anywhere except where the government could accommodate him. But the reality is that, he basically dismantled this entire structure of industrial licensing in one fell sweep. Manmohan Singh is called the father of reform. Actually, it was Narasimha Rao as Industries Minister who completely dismantled that system. And as a consequence, now in the 90s, for example, you had the Infosys coming up, you had Wipro, you had companies coming up. And a lot of the companies that were thriving in the past were struggling. And I can tell you a lot of the companies today who are basically trading in on the goodwill they have are going to struggle with digitalization. As Dr. Ghani has correctly pointed out, 400 million people in India. I think it's a little lower now because smartphones are spreading, but many hundreds of millions don't have access to the internet. Once they do, and once digital processes take place, and once a lot of governmental processes also go digital, that's going to create a revolution. So my only point is, I am very much, I saw in the 1992, the kind of opposition that was faced by P.V. Narasimha Rao in his reforms. I think Mr. Premachandran will tell you, he knows the history of that period very well. And in his own party, you had people like Arjun Singh, N.D. Tiwari, and others who opposed him and who frankly formed a party to basically attack him. And as a consequence of that split in the Congress party, the BJP became the single largest party. And the BJP got a clean track to come to power because of the split in the Congress party caused by the anti-Narasimha Rao group. So look, let me be quite clear. I don't expect you to read anything of what I write, but if you check and see my what I've written on demonetization, for example, what I've written on GST, for example, I think you'll find I've been very much less than complimentary about all these things. And the reality of situation is that at least, Modi 1.0 was a disappointment where reform is concerned. Direct tax reform, administrative reform, it was a disappointment. Modi 2.0, there are efforts at reform. And I think that's something which I personally am happy with. So far as this particular farmers bill is concerned, I wasn't aware that the APMCs were being dismantled. My impression was and remains that they would continue, but they would not have a monopoly, that farmers would be given an option. And if they wanted to go to the APMC, well, they were welcome to do so. And that means that the minimum support price will also have to be there. But it's not the only option to the farmer. And secondly, I was under the impression that the agents were not deregulated, but they had to come under GST and they had to come under income tax. If I am mistaken, I stand to be corrected. But as of today, let me tell you, there are a large number of people outside the income tax net. There are a large number of people who are underreporting their taxes. And that is one of my main points about demonetization. About 6% of the black money in India was currency. 94% was not. And I'm sorry to say, a lot of that 94% is in your country, United States, in New York, in Miami, and various other locations where you've got beautiful houses. Now, suddenly what happens, you have a relative, he's basically bad in school, bad in college, but he comes and settles down in New York or Singapore, and lo and behold, millions come to him for consultancy and for fees from all kinds of accounts in miscellaneous places, and he becomes a millionaire in no time. Now, frankly, I'd like to say, Mr. Premachandran is a sincere politician. He's an honest politician, but may I point out to Mr. Premachandran that in the 70 years of our independence, I've seen a lot of individuals who are not honest. I've seen a lot of parliamentary procedures that have been short-circuited, and I can assure you that, this did not begin in 2014. It began much earlier. So for me, I'm a little, if I may say so, let me tell you very frankly, I can acknowledge some of what Mr. Cyriac is saying, some of what Mr. Premachandran is saying, but I'd only like to say, I've seen it all before, but when I see a few little bits of reform here and there, I think then with public opinion, especially through, platforms like this, through the spread of the internet, through educating the farmers, educating, other people, we can promote healthy reform. And today the government has very wisely decided not to shut the door to courts. And I think they've wisely decided, and they've given an absolute guarantee on MSP. I quite agree this ought to have been discussed previously in Parliament, but at least it's been decided now. But I want to end this point by saying one thing. The farmers' representatives have only one demand. And that demand is the same demand that some political parties are saying. These 3 bills should be rolled back. If that happens, I can tell you, well, this government is going to be a lame duck government with 3.5 years left to go before the election. I'm not very sure that this government is very eager to be a lame duck government, even though the farmers may clap and applaud. And at the end of that, they become a lame duck government. In my view, they cannot go back. And the demand that is being put forward is only one demand: roll back the 3 bills. Well, that I think is a fairly maximalist demand.
Thank you so much, Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, you made a lot of good points in that statement, and there's a couple of things I want to dive deeply into here. Talking about the APMC, we can't look forward unless we understand the history of what lies behind us. So I want to go to our 2 panelists. I'll start with the Honorable MP. Sir, can you walk us briefly a little bit of what the history of the APMC actually is? And then I'd love to have Mr. Cyriac chime in on that. Honorable MP, please.
I think Mr. John Cyriac will be able to elucidate on that subject, but according to my limited information, I can very well substantiate that APMC is absolutely what Professor MD Nalapat has said is correct. Now it has become an option. But the question is, APMC, when it becomes an option, definitely the farming community will not be able to compete with the big business houses and corporate houses. We all know, suppose when they enter into the market, definitely they will be having a free hand compared to that of the APMC, which is being governed by the governmental agencies and so many other official, these things are there. But as far as when these corporates and big business houses are getting an opportunity to open the market and total deregulation of the market, see, regarding even my, just before I couldn't explain regarding this Essential Commodities Act, if you accept what the word which I have used is the value chain participant. There is a definition, value chain participant. So the extent of impact of this Essential Commodities Act 1955 amendment, that is processor value chain participant will not be within the Essential Commodities Act, that is not applicable to this thing. And further in the bill itself, it is being explained what is a value chain participant that will also include a distributor. That is why we are saying that when this is having a clear-cut intention of having the retail sector monopoly by the big business houses, when Professor M.T. Nalapat is talking about the monopolistic or the state monopoly, now it is going to be the monopoly of some big business houses and corporate houses. Even it is being heard that in Bangladesh itself, a big corporate, big business houses have already installed or started the business, started for procuring the food grains, for which this infrastructure capacity building has already started for $350 million. So they want to have the stock. Definitely they have to depend on the Indian markets. So this is the way how these big business houses are being benefited. Yes, absolutely, he is correct that when the deregulation comes, for the time being, that is at the time when the petroleum deregulation was all there, for the time being, preliminary stages, we had the benefit. The people got the benefit of the price which is coming down. But now what is happening? So same thing will be going to happen in future also. Poor farmers. Yes, absolutely, he is correct. After 1991, so many innovative reforms have come to our country. In the mobile revolution, technology revolution, so many things have happened. This is not the thing. This is the agricultural sector, which is the livelihood of the farmers. That is my case. In Europe and the Western countries and the developed countries, it is agricultural is a business. But as far as India is concerned, because the land population ratio, if you compare the land population ratio in India and countries like USA, Europe and other developed countries, it is small, medium agricultural holdings are here. So such a poor farmers they are losing the bargaining capacity. That is my point. They have to compete with the big traders. There is no regulation. There is nothing is there. There is no agent. There is the governmental intervention is not there. Definitely, they will be totally exploited by the big corporate houses or the big business houses. And there also the monopoly of the private sector. I think the competition also, we know the competition. In the various fields also, the competition is also very, very limited. So here in the case, this is even applicable to the distribution. That is that the definition of the value chain participant will come to the extent of the distribution side also. So that means the entire sector is being deregulated. And for the time being, and regarding the contract farming also, I'm not going to, because of the paucity of the time, I'm not going to the definitions which has been said in clause 4, section 4. See, the quality, the grade, the standard of farming are the conditions of the farming agreement. See, we know 4 acres, 5 acres, 3 acres, this is the small, medium land holdings of the farmers in most of the parts, and big land holdings are also there. So the quality, the grade, the standard of farming, these are the conditions of the farming agreement. And the price will be, and he has said that minimum support price will be assured, the government has assured, okay, I do agree. See, the point is, the government is still arguing that even after ensuring the minimum support price, why you are striking? Why you are not taking the government into confidence? Why? Because here this is a statute. We have passed a statute, the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Service Bill. When a legislation is there, when a statute is there by which the price cannot be controlled by minimum support price, how can an executive order by the government, an executive order by the government can never override the legislation which was passed by the government? That is why we are saying that the minimum support price should come as the part of the legislation, or it should have a statute or a legislative backing should be there. Unfortunately, the government is not conceding to that demand even now. So my point is, here the quality, grade, standard of farming, that means the standard of farming means so many interpretations can be given by the buyer at the time when the agricultural produce become ripe for taking, and at the time. See, these are the areas by which the contract farming, who will be these poor farmers, will be at the mercy of this big business houses. And also, and I'm so many other, in Parliament I have made a speech quoting so many other, in which finally it is this reverse tendency. That is the SCLAP RAG 1998, agri-business in general and contract farming in particular reinforces the trend towards proletarianization of the peasantry. The trend towards proletarianization appears in a disguised form whereby peasant producers preserve their access to land but lose their productive autonomy to agri corporations and become piece workers within their own tools for the job. This is the observation which has been made. See, if you examine what has happened in USA, see, formally, even before free market policy, that is before 1970, In United States of America, the poor farmers were getting 40% of the final retail price of the agricultural produce. After 1970, that is after the open market policy of the agriculture or after the reforms, farmers are only getting 50% of the final retail value of the agricultural produce. This is the situation in the developed countries, but they are financing, good subsidy is being provided. In Europe, around 7 to 8 lakh crores of subsidy is being provided to the farmers in order to support the farming community. So when these situations, how can we compare the situations prevailing in the developed countries and developing country like India, in which the backbone of Indian economy is still to an extent depending on agricultural production? In such a condition, how we are able to have this structural agricultural reforms will satisfy the needs or the demands of the farmers? That is the question which I would like to pose. And even we know that in Indian farming community, 48% of the Indian farming community is totally indebted, and 40% of the farming community want to quit the farming. This is the situation. So corporatization of agricultural, that is going to happen. That's what has happened in Europe and America. Corporatization of the agricultural will take away the farmers from their own land, and the reverse tendency will be the resulting effect of this. So agricultural reforms and the reforms in other sectors which we have pursued from the year 1991, like mobile revolution, technological revolution, this is entirely different. So that difference, how it will impact or affect the poor farming communities' future, that is a question to be discussed and considered. Yes, I do agree. Let us discuss all these issues. Without having threadbare discussion of all these issues, bulldozing the legislations like this, that can never be said as a good democratic practice, especially a country like India, have the biggest democracy in the world. We are model to the whole world in the election process, in the democratic practice. We are model. Even in American election, we have seen, and we are conducting our own elections, how Pakka elections we are conducting, and what is happening in America, United States of America, we are seeing. So we are a model democracy to the whole world, biggest democracy. And such a country bulldozing and disregarding or disempowering the parliamentary process is not good. Let us debate, discuss the impact, the merits and demerits of all these issues. These are the points which I would like to make. So poor farmers have to be protected. Whether this protection is being given by these bills, according to me, to my limited information, to my limited knowledge of my experience, I don't feel that it is a pro-farmer legislation, but it is pro-corporate big business houses are benefited out of this legislation. These are the words which I would like to make. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Member Parliament, Mr. Premachandran. Mr. Premachandran, you said that it almost seems inevitable that the trajectory of where the world is headed, that this agriculture business and the farmers' livelihood is on its way to be obsolete. But in India, where more than half of the country's population is somehow connected to agriculture and the agri sector, this is a very interesting way to look at things. Mr. Cyriac, I'd like to go to you. Talking a little bit about the role of the government here in terms of both pushing for national interests in terms of economic success, while also safeguarding its citizens' livelihoods and their future. Regarding these bills, let's talk a little bit about the powers of Parliament and state legislators. Mr. Cyriac, can you describe for our viewers, our attendees, under whose purview does agriculture policy actually fall? Is it a state issue? Is it a national issue? And in your opinion, should it be centralized in a country as diverse as India, where you have states like Punjab that are well known for certain types of crops and produce, and you come down south and it's a completely different picture? Mr. Cyriac?
No, as you know, in Indian constitution, India has got a very detailed written constitution, unlike in United Kingdom and some other places. In our constitution, we have divided the legislative powers of the sectors of government of India at the central level, the federal structure, and also at the state level. So some subjects in the constitution are indicated as central subjects where only the central government, the parliament, is able to legislate. And some other subjects are given as state subjects, state list, where only the state government, state legislatures will have to decide. There is a third area called concurrent list, where both the states, either the state or the center can legislate. But the center's legislation will prevail over the state's legislation if there are any differences in the terms, controversies, etc. So agriculture is really a part of the state list. It is a state list subject. So strictly speaking, the agriculture, this particular three enactments should have been brought by the state governments. In fact, in the past also, you were asking previously the background of the APMC, etc. So I think I must, my friend Mr. Premachandran conveniently pushed that subject onto me. Therefore, I think I should just mention one sentence at least about that. The APMC thing began in the 19th century. Sometime in the 1880s or somewhere there in that hoary past, the British government, who was the controlling authority in India at that time, they decided to ensure that cotton should be made available for the cotton mills in Lancashire. So they wanted the cotton to be of uniform quality, good trading practices. It was brought in the interest of not the farmers, but in the interest of the purchasers of this from UK, from England. So that was how it began. Later on, for various other crops, this regulated market, the concept of regulated market came in, where the farmers will come, prices are determined in a very transparent fashion. So that to the satisfaction of everyone, it is transparently done. The farmer is also saved from exploitation by the trader. And middlemen, of course, they should be out of the picture. That was the aim. But later on, as it developed, APMC developed, it grew into a monopoly. Every monopoly will develop some bad habits, and naturally governments wanted to reform them. So in 2003, the government of India, under Mr. Prime Minister Vajpayee, they made a model legislation. They said this is a state subject. We don't want to legislate, but we want to suggest these reforms, suggest these modifications in the APMC Act for the state governments to follow, acknowledging that this subject is in the state list. But now, some of the states acted on that and some of the states did not. That is a different story. But now the Modi government has suddenly taken up this subject with themselves, throwing a challenge to the well-known concepts of federalism. India, recently, after the 2014 BJP government came into the picture, there has been many instances of onslaught on the federal structure. Onslaughts on the powers of the state by the center, which is all powerful. Now the states they have lost their powers of taxation. They have lost their powers in many other areas. And now this is one more nail in the coffin of federalism, I am afraid. So because of this, instead of this BJP government could have done things. They have got 11 state governments under their control now, or more than that, I think. They could have asked their own state governments to enact this legislation, carry out the reform, so that they will not be accused of diluting the powers of diluting the concept of federalism. They could have asked their own state governments to implement this, bring in these legislations. Naturally, their consequences would have been seen. If the injurious effects are more, there would have been a chance to effect a course correction. Instead of doing all that, they suddenly brought this legislation, taking upon themselves, perhaps taking the plea that this is interstate trade. Interstate trade is something which is in the concurrent list, and therefore we are operating like that. They can more or less justify their position. So the urgency of bringing in this legislation to please somebody, that concept is again coming back. So that is one thing. Then because of this particular area, I feel it is a challenge to the federal structure of India and in the democratic structure that we have got under our constitution. This is a serious instance of a violation. That is my belief. If only the government was keen to avoid such a controversy, they could have easily asked their own state governments. And the 2003 model enactment of the Vajpayee government could have been modified. In fact, that enactment provided for contracting also. But on this occasion, I must also point out, Dr. Professor Nalapat had mentioned, he thought there was level playing field between the APMC and the private contractor. It is not so. The APMC things are subjected to 8.5% tax in Punjab, whereas outside, no tax. That is why I said not level playing field. Therefore, the people will be tempted to move away from the APMC into the private yard. And that way, APMC will gradually disintegrate, will close down. And with that will go the FCI. Perhaps the government may privatize the FCI also in the meantime. So with all that, I feel it is a very dangerous experiment we are embarking upon. The government, instead of the Prime Minister is assuring, yes, we will maintain MSP. But the farmers are saying we cannot take the Prime Minister's word for granted. Prime Minister had mentioned in 2014 that the farmers will be given the benefit of MS Swaminathan Commission recommendations. That is on 50% more than the cost of production. Then in the next year, 2015, after winning the election and coming to power, the same government said, this is impractical. They submitted an affidavit in the Supreme Court saying that we cannot implement this particular commission's recommendations and we will do something else to help the farmers. Then in 2017, the then agriculture minister came and said that we are going to double the income of farmers. So like that, many pronouncements have been made by the government regarding these promises, which are not kept at all. Therefore, the mere statement of Prime Minister, though it is made by the Prime Minister himself, people are not willing to accept it at the face value. That is why they say make an amendment in the enactment that the contract price should be more than, not less than the minimum support price fixed for that particular crop for that particular year by the government. So once that guarantee is given, now though the farmers are demanding total repeal, total withdrawal of all the enactments, I don't think the government will lose their face like this. They may not do. As Dr. Nalapat mentioned, they would not like to become a lame duck government. We also don't want that to happen. We want them to complete their thing, complete their period. So the government should negotiate with the farmers. In the negotiation, people will not stand by their original stand. They will come down from their original position and then meet the other side halfway down the road. So that way, a frank negotiation should be done, where I think this incorporation of MSP in the enactment itself will go a long way in making the farmers also realize that they should be adopting a conciliatory tone. So I feel this is the situation. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Cyriac. There's so much to delve into when it comes to this particular topic, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. But I do want to get to some of the audience questions as well. I have one more question from our list that I'd like to bring to Dr. Ghani if he's with us. Dr. Ghani, if you're there, I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit about what happens after. So Professor Nalapat made his comment that these bills, if the government should acquiesce to the protesters' demands, it would render them a lame duck government. And Mr. Cyriac and the Honorable MP have just said government is for the people, and where agriculture represents more than half the country. And if this bill is not in the interest of agriculture, then the government would be in the right to listen to the protesters and give them their demands. which at the onset is repealing the bills. While we wait for Dr. Ghani to join us, Professor Nalapat, I'd like to go back to you. These bills are not the end be all. Like you said earlier, you would have liked to seen action on these bills 50 years ago. And agriculture is as ingrained in our heritage as is just the history of humankind. So what happens after here, right? So if these bills should be repealed, which is the one and main demand of the opposition. What comes next? Repealing these bills, will that guarantee in any kind of way that big corporations won't try to tap the agriculture sector in India, or that progress won't take its due course in time? Professor Nalapat, how do you see this playing out?
Well, I'd just like to say that Mr. Premachandran very correctly pointed out to the fact that oil prices have crashed, but prices of diesel and petrol in India have risen. It is an extraordinary situation. And in my view, it is completely, it is effective in terms of promoting economic growth. And the tax, for example, the same high tax rates have continued. And, so that is where, frankly, a lot of the issues we agree. But on this particular matter, I am only, let me say one thing. Look, let me tell you one thing. Unlike the other people who have spoken to you, I have nothing to do with government, and I've had nothing to do with government. I'm a private citizen. So personally, I would like to say, Manipal, my university, 50 years ago, it was a village. And today, if you come there, it's not entirely a village. I mean, frankly, there are, both in technology and in education and various other fields, it's not a village. Well, that's exactly what can happen to the smaller towns and cities of India. And I would like to see that develop the way they're developing in Kerala, for example. In Kerala, you have a lot of small towns and even village areas, frankly, which are now part of the knowledge economy because of the manpower there. I only want to make one point. When I am in Delhi, I live in a place called Gurugram, which is, my house is about 15 minutes from the airport. Frankly, I'd only like to say that, yes, I fully support the right to protest. I fully support the right of the farmers of the Punjab and Haryana to register their anger and their protest and their effort to change the thing. But please, does it have to involve choking all the roads that come into the capital city of India or any other city? That's my only point. Now, we saw protests in Delhi in the past, something on Shaheen Bagh, where again, roads were blocked. And I'm a little surprised that a government is supposed to be strong and tough. Couldn't do a thing about it. And even now, frankly, you are seeing all these roads blockaded. I would only request those who are protesting, please don't block the roads. Please don't block the highways. I have moved around. I haven't gone to the protest site, but I can tell you, I've gone to some of the closed shops. I've gone to some of the closed restaurants. I've gone to some of the closed businesses where people are on the road. And a lot of people are already on the road because of COVID. And the fact that hardly any kind of compensation, unlike in the case of so many other countries, has been given to companies in India, small, big, medium, because of COVID, very inadequate. So I only want to say, a lot of people are suffering, and it's not just the people who are sitting in the highway who are suffering. I am suffering. I am terrified that access to my city is cut off. That if there is some kind of an emergency, I can't get through. I can't go. That vegetables and essential supplies are not able to come through except by air. And tomorrow, if they come and say we'll occupy the airport to create more, what do we do? So I want to say, democracy, yes, but I would like to say that my right ends where somebody else's right begins, and citizens have a right to a peaceful life and to a peaceful occupation, and a protest that completely blocks the capital city of India for weeks and months on end. Well, personally, pardon me, I may be anti-democratic, I may be pro-authoritarian, I may be just plain stupid, but personally, I don't think this is on.
Professor Nalapat, there's a lot of things you said there, but I think there's one thing unequivocally no one will say is that you're stupid. Absolutely not. And not with impassioned remarks such as that. But Professor, you did mention a couple of things about the actual protest and the impact it's having on the ground. Some of our audience questions also touched on this, and I'd like to go to the Honorable MP because you have been on the protest site. So you are essentially a source for all of us at this point to kind of give us a real-time breakdown of what's going on. Mr. MP Premachandran, there's a couple of points that some of our viewers brought up, and I'd also like you to address what Professor Nalapat said. Regards to the actual protest, the Andolan, the Morcha, as folks are calling it, around the world, that's taken place outside of Delhi. Talk to us a little bit about what kind of disruption it's causing, what the locals are feeling about it, and then also please comment about the kind of participants of these protests, because sitting abroad we're hearing a lot of messaging that the protest is fueled by various factions, whether it's Khalistanis, whether it's anti-BJP, whether it's NRIs who have vested various business interests. MP Premachandran, what's the reality on the ground of the actual protest? What kind of impact is it having of the folks that are local to those areas?
Yes, I fully agree with him that this is causing so many difficulties to the residents of Delhi. Yes, any strike, any democratic movement like this will definitely infringes the right of citizens of our country. I think these are the time by which the judiciary or the government has to intervene in the matter. I think the matter has already been taken by the Supreme Court. And even the Supreme Court has asked this question to the government whether you can stay for a particular period till this matter is discussed over, or interim stay could be given from the implementation of these acts. But unfortunately, the government is not able to concede to the demand, even to the Supreme Court. In such a situation, any strike, any movement will definitely, so many difficulties have to be faced by the people. I think it is the bounden duty of the government to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens of our country. The freedom of movement and freedom of association, all these things. See, we have seen during this COVID-19 pandemic also, most of our fundamental rights have been taken away or infringed by the government. We are suffering a lot because of the COVID-19. We are adjusting with all these things. Yes, here also a big situation. It is not a pandemic, I do agree, but a movement by the Kisan of our country. And another very unique significance of this strike I have seen from the ground is that most of these families, I've talked to series of persons, families, and I spent there for 5-6 hours among the strikers, and they're all saying that in my family 2 soldiers are there. In my family, I'm having a brave soldier in my family, my brother, my husband, and so many people. So they're part and parcel of our integrity and unity and our national pride of India, the Sikh community in particular. So in such a situation, I think that the government has to concede to the demands of the farmers. Yes, one very, very pertinent point which has been pointed out by Professor M.D. Nalapat, I fully respect his words that only one demand, that means you repeal the law. Farmers have to discuss, the clause by clause discussion have to take place. I think that such a mediation has to come because we all know that the government, the authority of the government, that means we are questioning the authority of the government. If you want to withdraw unilaterally, withdraw all the laws, then only we will discuss. Which I don't think that is a positive sign on the part of the strikers, because we have to discuss. And government is ready to discuss it clause by clause discussion. That is also well and good. That is why I'm saying that let us convene the parliament. This is maybe the first time in the history of Indian parliament when the farming community in India, when the Kisan movement is there. Yes, we are the democratic forum of the country is the parliament. Again, we are convening the parliament. What are the changes to be taken place? What are the needs of the farmers? How to make the law as a fruitful law without harming the interest of the farming community. How can we make the agricultural reforms in such a way, that is in such a self-critical, positive way? Why don't the government can also come forward? Because we don't have the winter session. Now we are going for the budget session. Before the budget session, why don't we have 1 or 2 days or 2-3 days for discussing this matter, both houses of the parliament, and come to a consensus and then rectify the mistakes and make a Pakka law? In that way, the democracy has to perform. And also the Kisan movement, that the organizers of the Kisan movement also have to come down, that without repealing the law, we will not come for a discussion. That is not, that cannot be considered as a positive democratic way. Yes, their bargaining power is on the basis of the strike. This is, the strike is the weapon. This Kisan Andolan is the weapon in the hands of the farming community. Now, definitely they cannot lose their bargaining power. But at the same time, in a democracy, we have to mutually agree, we have to mutually concede, and we have to compromise to an extent so that to a resolution come, for which my concrete suggestion is the best forum of democracy is the Parliament of India. Let the government convene the Parliament to discuss these issues and make any rectifications, corrections or amendment, whatever is required. Let it be done through the Parliament. That is the best form of solution which I can suggest.
Thank you so much, Member of Parliament N.K. Premachandran. All of these geopolitical, economic, and of course, agricultural related conversations, we still can't forget one very important thing, that we are still in the midst of a deadly pandemic that is ravaging India in particular. And this type of mass gathering, we're not seeing mass gathering without masks. Folks are not using the precautions that are recommended by world scientific and medical bodies like the CDC and the WHO. I'd like to ask any of my panelists, to comment. After the protests are over, what kind of a COVID upsurge can we expect? Maybe this is, a question for folks on the ground. I know MP Premachandran, you just answered, but Mr. Cyriac, I'd love to hear from you. From a matter of government and public health, what kind of an aftermath can we expect after this all winds down?
Maybe a very disastrous situation, because if they are taking a huge risk by not using the mask and crowding together without maintaining the distance, etc., between the people. So I am afraid this is a very potentially dangerous situation. So this should not be allowed to continue. The government also has got a responsibility to prevent this situation from continuing. So therefore, I would urge that they call immediately these people, saying that yes, we are not going to say that we will give the word of honor only. We are only giving the Prime Minister's commitment about continuance of the MSP. We are willing to incorporate in the amended act. We will amend the act. Like that, a positive signal should be given so that the people will be tempted to come for negotiation. They will be induced to come for negotiation. And the whole thing is settled and the crowd is dissolved at the earliest. Very dangerous situation. In fact, the more they stay there, the longer they stay there, their positions will become bitter. They will become more fixed. It will become, the situation will go out of hand. It's a very, very potentially dangerous situation. So the government should seriously and immediately call them for negotiation. Perhaps telling them through intermediaries, through responsible and people who are having credibility. Such people should go and meet them and convey the government's decision that amendment will be made in the enactment to incorporate the minimum support price guarantee. Level playing field will be given, but come for a negotiation. It will be a give and take. Some of the positions they will give away. Some of the positions the government will concede, and that way an honorable settlement for both sides without losing the face of either party will be done. And this crowd, which is a dangerously potential situation, can be avoided. The crowd can be dissolved people would go back. It's a very severe, serious matter. So I would suggest immediate action by the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cyriac. I think with these remarks, we will begin the wrap up of this wonderful webinar. So many insightful comments and detailed information regarding some points on these bills. I'd like to invite another member of the IAPC team, Mr. Biju Chako, to do the vote of thanks. Mr. Chako.
Thank you, Ashmita, Chairman Dr. Chalil, President Dr. S.S. Lal, our most valued invited guest, Dr. Ejaz Ghani, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, Mr. P.C. Cyriac, Sir, Honorable MP N.K. Premachandran, Sir, Madhav Das Nalapat, Ashmita Yogiraj, ladies and gentlemen participating via Zoom and watching us live. And even like this cannot happen overnight. I, on behalf of IAPC and the entire team, our guest in audience here together, and on my own personal behalf, extend a very hearty thanks to all the speakers for gracing your important work and deliberate with us your findings and thoughts and opinions today. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated panelists who know their job and are result-oriented. I would like to take this time to thank our speaker, Dr. Ejaz Ghani, for enlightening us with your knowledge on the high-profile topic of discussion with us this afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Ejaz. Thank you very much. We have been fortunate enough to get Mr. P.C. Cyriac late at night from India joining with us, and here it is afternoon. Thank you, sir, for enlightening us and expressing your thoughts. Thank you for your invaluable contribution and participating in this webinar. Thank you, Honorable MP N.K. Premachandran, sir, for gracing the occasion this afternoon again with us from your busy schedule and sharing us with your insights, findings, and opinion today from ground. Thank you, sir, very much. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for Madhav Das Nalapat for joining us once again and participating in our web series discussion. We are really enlightened, and with your presence and strong views on the subject, it gives us some deep insights into this topic and some interesting facts. Thank you, sir. I would like to take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to Ambassador Kapoor on the support and continued guidance he has extended to all of us, and again and time and again towards IAPC. Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. Dr. Chalil, Dr. Matthew Joyce, sir, Matikiti Isho, Hema Virani, Anita Naveen, I cannot thank you everyone enough for the involvement today and the willingness to take on the completion of tasks beyond their comfort zone. Thank you to my entire team. Thank you very much. I'd like to express our sincere thanks to Ashmita Yogiraj for moderating this afternoon very gracefully, and to her Just Punjabi and Just Hindi TV for giving an excellent coverage for the webinar today. Thank you, Ashmita. I express my appreciation to the people who have been the strength of this IAPC web series meetings. Once again, I would like to state that we are glad to all the speakers here over the meeting. We thank you for being with us. It has remained a pronounced pleasure. Have a great day ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Biju. And before we wrap up, Chairman Dr. Joe Chalil, the brains behind all these webinars, putting everything together and getting these great folks online, of course, with the help of the team and all the dignitaries that are working with the IAPC group. Dr. Chalil, you have some wonderful announcements for us, please.
Thank you. Just a quick second, Ashmita. Great job, everybody. We just, due to popular demand, we're gonna redo this as a town hall next weekend. Next Saturday, same time, IAPC Town Hall, where we will have our IAPC journalist members who will be joining on camera, and there'll be discussions on this topic and explanations on it. So December 26th, stay tuned. We will send you, announce the Town Hall invite on Zoom and the password so you can join in and discuss. Thank you so much. Again, just one point, the views expressed in this program are that of the panelists and not of IAPC. We are a nonprofit charity based in Washington, D.C. We don't have any political affiliation in US or in India. Thank you.
Just allow me to wish you all a very happy Christmas and a very happy New Year. God